Hello there, guys. It's Friday. The weekend is ahead of us, so that means one thing. It's time for another big old chat about all the big news from the games industry, because this is VGC Off The Record. Of course, I'm joined by two of the most wonderful, most informative people from the games industry. Our very own Andy, the Source Robinson, with all his connections, and the head of gamesindustry.biz, Christopher Dring. Gentlemen, how are you doing today?
Good. Excellent. Delighted to be here.
It's wonderful. What have you been playing this week? Anything exciting? Are you all good?
Warzone, just Warzone for me. I played. Do you know what? I played a bit of Ghost of Tsushima. Very difficult for me to pronounce this week because I've not played it before. So I.
Oh really?
Yeah, no, I skipped it. Big open world. Time sinks are really not my thing. I mean, I love the setting. That's kind of what sold it to me.
Beautiful.
It was on sale.
It's definitely beautiful.
The word of mouth has really sold the fact that I kind of needed to jump in on that, so I started that this week.
It's one of those very good 7 out of 10 games in my opinion. I enjoyed it. I completed in the end. It took me an awful lot. I did have to push through towards the end eventually because it did feel like a little bit like I was doing the same things every now and then. But there was a moment where I was about to drop out. Then all of a sudden I got some really cool little thing and it kind of grabbed me back in again. But especially as well, you're playing on the PS5, I guess, now with all the 4K and 60 FPS and stuff. It's nice. It's good. What about yourself, Chris? Anything in particular?
I've been playing A Hat in Time.
I've been meaning to give that a go. Is it any good?
It's pretty good, but I felt after completing 4 Mario games back to back that the next thing I should do is play another 3D platformer. I'm surprised by it. It's slightly risque is not the word. It's slightly more adult than I expected it to be. But it's I've played a chunk of that. It's quite good. I'm playing Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 again because it was incredible on PS4. So I thought I'll just get it again on PS5.
Do you know what?
I did.
I really want them to make a new one. They're not going to, are they? But I really want them because that really do you reckon they will do? Because it means it's done really well, but has it done well enough? No, do I. But
they've been moved over to Blizzard, the developer. But I mean, I'd love a Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3, just like DLC for this game, just give us a few more levels. But the Vicarious Visions are making the Switch port, so they're not completely in Blizzard for the minute. So.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would love it. I would absolutely love it because that was one of my favorite games last year. I would say. Like, I think maybe it was like the nostalgic child of escapism of it because of everything that was going on the year last year. But it was beautiful. It was beautiful as well. It was fun. Yeah.
It was brilliant. It was perfect, like technically perfect. It's a marvelous game. And I actually one of my first ever Tony Hawk's games was a Vicarious Visions Tony Hawk's game, which was also Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 port on the Game Boy Advance, and that was a technical marvel back then. They're pretty consistent.
More games like that, games industry, if you're watching, which some of you definitely are. Anyway, this is VGC. Every Friday, we go off the record to deliver you the most considered, most informative takes on all the big stories from the world of video games. And if you're a fan of this, and you like looking at our faces, why wouldn't you be? Let's be honest. You can catch us every Friday afternoon over on VGC's YouTube channel, but that's not your thing, and you're on the go, you're in your car, you're going to work or whatever, and you've got your headphones on. You can catch us now for the first time on all major podcast providers, so you got no excuse to miss us. Basically, don't miss us. Go and get us Spotify or whatever. Anyway, today this is VGC Off The Record, and we got 4 headlines, and every single one of them is a big talking point. Then right at the end of the show as well, we'll be getting to your questions, which have been submitted using the hashtag AskVGC. But these are the headlines, and they're all genuinely big ones today. PlayStation Studios is bringing a game to Xbox Game Pass. The world is colliding. Naughty Dog is reportedly remaking the original Last of Us for PlayStation 5, and Nintendo and Xbox have signed up for Digital E3 2021. And finally, Xbox is reportedly in talks to publish Hideo Kojima's next game. But we're going to start with a fascinating one, and it's definitely a very, very big one. PlayStation Studios MLB The Show 21, Sony's first game published on Xbox, has been announced as a day one addition to Game Pass. And this is over on videogameschronicle.com, of course. It says the baseball title, which is also coming to PlayStation consoles as a $60/$70 release, will be free to Xbox Game Pass subscribers on its release date of April 20th for Series X and S and Xbox One. MLB's games team announced on Friday. The Show 21 will also be available on Android phones and tablets via Xbox Cloud Gaming Beta for Ultimate members, it's announced. This is big, gentlemen. This is very big. It feels like something I never thought I would see. An Xbox logo and a Sony logo together at the start of a game. Chris, what do you make of this news? And is this the start of a bold new era in gaming?
No.
End of podcast.
I mean, these things happen. Minecraft, for instance, is such a massive franchise that to put it just on Xbox will benefit Xbox, but really hurt Minecraft. And that's what you're seeing here. You know, MLB being a exclusive game to PlayStation hurts that MLB game. FIFA, look at the amount of money FIFA and NBA make. Huge franchises monetized to the brim, they're just you know, you saw $1 billion was spent on Codemasters, right?
Yeah,
they've only really got one game. They've got Dirt and Grid, but they don't sell very well. F1 is the reason why they bought that franchise. Sports games are massive business, and MLB would have gone to PlayStation. They did in 2019. They went to PlayStation and said, look, we need this game. We're looking at what our competitors are doing, looking at our games in other franchises. We want to be hitting as many people as possible. We want to be making as much money at this as possible. So if you want to renew your licensing deal with a Sony, and why wouldn't Sony? Because as I've just pointed out, they're hugely lucrative games. You're going to have to put it on all platforms possible. And MLB kind of has that sort of sway. And you know, Sony's probably looking at the bottom line on those games and going, well, we can't say no to it. But we're not about to see The Last of Us do that. Popped over to Xbox Game Pass. That's a completely different thing. This is very specifically a licensing, sports-related world. Sony sort of don't make many games like this. MLB is a bit of an odd game even in their lineup. You know, they used to make F1 games back in the day. They don't really do this anymore. They only tend to do big single-player blockbusters. This is an exception, and as a result, it's an exception in terms of it being on Game Pass and being on Xbox and everywhere else.
Do you share those thoughts, Andy? Is ready for more? Are you a baseball fan? Is anyone here a baseball fan? I'll be honest. I feel like for UK listeners, this is very much a like, oh, okay.
I actually got told off for calling it the MLB in the story when it's just MLB. So no, I don't have a Scooby about baseball. And yeah, I wish I could say something to make this story a bit sexier, but I think Chris has kind of nailed it. I think the other thing to note is that I think the MLB themselves are allegedly publishing the game on Xbox. So this is very much a, you know, licensing decision. It's not like Sony have said, yeah, let's, you know, because it must be a little bit, I don't want to say embarrassing, but, you know, troublesome for them that this has all come out. I mean, it's not a surprise to me that, you know, Phil Spencer and the whole caboodle have been properly pushing, you know, this otherwise not, you know, remarkable kind of game on all of their channels, because it does make Sony look a little bit silly among.
They'll love it. I reckon
base.
They'll definitely love it.
A little bit. I mean, the sports games do well on Xbox. They make a lot of money, and PlayStation will make a lot of money out of this, and they'll plow that money back into their studios and their development teams, which will mean more games or bigger games or better games, more staff. It makes pure business sense. It benefits the game, it benefits MLB, it will benefit PlayStation. And I don't think it will mean anything in terms of Xbox and PlayStation's, if there is, whatever that is.
Well, from a consumer perspective, though, because if I'm a baseball fan, I don't know, if I'm into I can't even name a single baseball team. I'm trying to think. Is it the Knicks? Is that? I don't know. Yeah, if I'm one of those fans, right, and I'm there thinking I want to play MLB The Show 21, right, and I'm seeing it's day one on Game Pass, and then it's $70 over on PS5. It feels like this constantly good news for Game Pass at the moment, and it feels like they're starting to make kind of a little bit of headway towards maybe even winning one or two people over, because it's when does it become hard to ignore? I mean, for Sony, can you see any kind of retaliatory thing? Maybe it's probably too late for a reduction in price, obviously, or anything like that. But I mean, do you think they'll be concerned by the perception of this?
I'm kind of surprised they've not put it on like as a PS Plus game or something, because it's undeniable that it's bad optics for PlayStation, right? That people on Xbox can get their new baseball game as part of their subscription, but it's $70. It's one of those $70 games on PS5. That looks shit. I mean, I get that it's good business for them, et cetera, but this has undeniably been used as a PR hit. The amount of Xbox has been pushing it, and you know, obviously, people are now talking about this. It was already an issue. The value that is over on Xbox that, you know, is just kind of not present currently on PlayStation.
Yeah.
I think it depends. I mean, it's. I don't know. I don't know MLB's audience. I think there's a thing like if it was FIFA. Here's the thing. FIFA. Like, I know lots of FIFA players, and they only play FIFA. It's all they play. They play every year, and they play FIFA. It's the only game they play. They wouldn't.
Maybe the odd Warzone. Maybe
they'll drop into a Fortnite or something. But generally speaking, they're subscribing to a Game Pass subscription for somebody that only plays FIFA doesn't make sense, right? It doesn't make financial sense. You're only buying one game a year. And this is such a new thing. We're seeing, I think, it's 18 million Xbox Game Pass subscribers, which is fantastic, but it's nothing compared to the 110 million people that own PlayStation 4s. So there is this thing about whether or not, as far as the business model, does it make sense? I mean, Xbox has probably paid the MLB a bunch of money to get this game onto Game Pass. Xbox are probably not making much money out of it. That's fine. That's not their strategy. Their strategy is long term. It's what their goal is. It isn't, but it's different to PlayStation's. And I don't know is the answer, really. You know, we're in uncharted territory here. We're looking at the data. We're learning a lot, and PlayStation will be as well. This is a great insight for PlayStation, right? They're going to get insight into how games perform on Game Pass, where the value is, you know, whether or not they can monetize MLB and make money out of it. Take-Two had this because Take-Two were still are skeptical about subscription services. But then Microsoft bought Obsidian, bringing in a Take-Two title, The Outer Worlds, I think it is, to Game Pass. And Take-Two said in their financials, well, we're going to find out, aren't we? We're going to learn without any risk to ourselves how this is going to
the irony is that almost certainly sales of MLB on PlayStation will go up as a result of this deal, right?
Quite possibly. You do have that effect. Some games have that. We saw it with Rocket League many years ago, and we see it a lot now, where a game released on a subscription service where millions of people rush in to play it end up lifting sales on other platforms because people are talking about it, they're sharing it, they're putting it up on YouTube, they're streaming it, and that creates a halo effect where it sort of benefits everything. You actually see an increase in sales, and that's why you might see canny publishers doing a PlayStation Plus deal and at the same time doing a discount on Xbox because they know that this will cause a spike over here.
I guess that answers my question from earlier as well about why it's not on PS Plus.
Yeah, well, yeah, and maybe it will be eventually.
I mean, you only have to look at Outriders, right? Like, I mean, I think it broke Square Enix's day one Steam record. Obviously, that game's on Game Pass, so it's like you said, it just means that it's more talked about, it's more streamed about. There are more people playing that game, and you know, the word of mouth results in people on other platforms who perhaps don't have an Xbox, you know, picking up.
If it's good, you've seen, you know, I think that Ninja Theory game last year had the opposite effect. It was in Game Pass, million people rushed in to play that game straight away, and then
I liked that game. I feel bad about that.
Bleeding edge, yeah. I mean, I'm sure. I mean, it didn't get much of a chance. You know, we saw it in games can bounce back from bad launches, but it's very hard. Game Pass it has a sort of mobile phone thing because mobile phone games are so cheap. You play it for 5 minutes, go, yeah, it's rubbish. You get rid of it. If you spent $60 on it, you'll give it more of a go.
Yeah.
Game Pass has that. You can, if you're not going to be gripped, if you're not going to get hooked and excited straight away, if the online servers aren't working very well and your tutorial isn't very good, you lose the audience, and you've then got to fight to get them back. And that's not the downside of Game Pass. That's the challenge of it, I think.
Yeah, definitely. There's they know what they're doing either way. I think it's fair to say. The second story today, once again, Sony, big in the news as always. This is a big one. Naughty Dog is reportedly remaking the original Last of Us for PlayStation 5. Now, there's loads of news that come out today via Bloomberg and Jason Schreier. And this is a report from Bloomberg which claims the project was originally in development at PlayStation's Visual Arts Service Group before the studio was switched to a support role on the game. Its development is now being led by series creator Naughty Dog, allegedly, which is said to have taken charge of the project following the completion of The Last of Us Part 2 in 2020. And there's loads of news around this, basically. It's a big whole report, which you can check online, of course, via Jason Schreier. And essentially, it's all about Sony's obsession with blockbusters, which is once again stirring unrest within the PlayStation empire. Jim Ryan has come in. Obviously, they look much more American central now, and there's casualties because of this as a result. Andy obviously broke the story recently about Japan studios closing, Santa Monica studio closed, and even Ben Studios, according to this article, despite relative success financially for Days Gone, won't get a sequel. Andy, what do you make about all this news? There's a lot to take in, obviously.
I think you hit the nail on the head. In the real story here is obviously Sony's kind of its obsession with big blockbusters and the fact that anything kind of that doesn't reach that incredibly high bar now doesn't seem worthwhile to them. So that's why you're kind of seeing kind of the more artistic kind of niche titles and studios kind of reduced or kind of closed off. I mean, obviously Japan Studios, the big one recently, their fiscal year kind of shifting at the start of this month, resulted in all of their original teams over there basically being kind of gutted, other than I think Asobi, I think they're called the Astro Playroom guys, who are excellent.
Yeah.
And, you know, this started a while ago because obviously a lot of the UK studios went as well. So it's not necessarily a new thing, but this report kind of offers a bit more insight into, you know, some more kind of effects of that. And Days Gone, which was kind of quite a tentpole release, it seemed to sell all right. And critically, I don't think it hit their expectations.
No.
So perhaps it's not surprising that they would rather, you know, according to this report, have them, you know, helping out with an Uncharted game, which is guaranteed to, you know, do gangbusters, than to try and drag this kind of divisive open world IP up a bit closer to that stature. Yeah, Chris, I'm sure you got more of this.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's difficult because you're talking about human beings and job losses and things being cut.
Yeah.
But in terms of the industry, the industry overall, it's not a terrible thing PlayStation's doing. They're charging $70 for their games because they view their games as being the creme de la creme. They're the best video games you can buy. Days Gone isn't that. It's fine. It's not that. Ghost of Tsushima, Last of Us Part 2, Spider-Man. These games are 10 out of 10, 9 out of 10, super quality games. That's what PlayStation's about now. And it's actually started well before the globalization. Like, I can't remember the last time they did a multiplayer game. Was it a Starhawk or something? It goes quite.
So I think their worldwide studios were centralized before the core business. Is that right? I think that happened around maybe the early PS3 days.
Yeah,
because obviously I've covered this a bit, and that was pointed out.
Well, back in the old days, you had things like Invisimals, right? Which was a game that existed because it was popular in Spain. Like, it was nobody bought Invisimals apart from in Spain. You had this a lot. You had PlayStation sort of investing in games. But as games get more expensive to develop, it makes sense for them to consolidate. But also, it actually makes sense for the wider community. PlayStation making indie games isn't something indie developers want to see. Right, and Psygnosis and all those big studios in Liverpool who closed that PlayStation used to operate have all formed other studios who are making more games and different games and all this kind of stuff. And PlayStation is supporting them by getting them on the platform, sometimes signing them exclusively. That's their way of doing it. PlayStation probably view their job as a platform holder is our games, our identity as a PlayStation first-party studio is this, whereas all of these other games. That's what third parties contribute to us. That's what they add to the PlayStation ecosystem. And there was an article that Rob Fahey on our website wrote many years ago about how PlayStation is making single player games because everyone else is making multiplayer games. They don't want to compete with the multiplayer games. They don't want to compete with Activision. Why would they? You know, they don't want to. It's not because they couldn't think they could take them on. It's because they've already got it. So they were filling gaps that weren't there. And they probably think, you know, we don't need Japan Studio making indie style titles because we've got lots of indie devs doing that for us. And that's kind of the stewardship of
have they though? I mean, I turn on my PS5 now, and I remember in the early. I mean, every new console it takes a little while for the big hitters turn up, right? But I remember the early days of PS4. You could turn it on, and there'd always be like a cool indie game to play. And it feels like PS5 is kind of missing that. I mean, I know what you're saying is absolutely right. There's absolutely nothing wrong with this strategy that PlayStation are taking, and it actually makes a lot of sense in terms of differentiating their offering from Xbox, for example, because Sony make the best first-party games out of the two. You know, there's little argument there. You know, when Sony release a first-party game, it's usually, you know, bar a few, a 10 out of 10, right? They release games that move the medium forward, you know, big cinematic, amazing, incredible blockbusters. But that's not necessarily, why I love PlayStation, why a lot of people love PlayStation. It's you think about it's the regional flavor that you're talking about.
Yeah.
You think about like SingStar and Buzz and like you said, Warhawk and these like flawed. I mean, 7 out of 10 games are interesting, right? Here's the thing.
Yeah.
Like usually games get 10 out of 10 because they're sort of like everything to everyone. Like, and sometimes that makes them a little bit uninteresting. I mean, I'm going to miss all of those Japan studio titles. I mean, my favorite PS5 game is Astrobot, right? How long before that gets cold? Like, really?
Well, I mean, I mean,
just from a personal, a purely selfish personal point of view, I don't like what they're doing because I do not see why they can't, put out these kind of continue to release these mega blockbusters and also supplement them with a little bit of flavor. Does everything need to make the graph move?
No, but I mean, I think I understand what you're saying, but I think the things with those Japan studio games, they will exist, they will continue. Those developers don't disappear. They reappear at their own studios and they end up doing their own things. And you know what? Sony probably ends up funding them a little bit, But it's they're quite invested in a lot of these teams. But it's just that in terms of what they want to focus on, what they want to market, the strategy, it's like we could invest. I'm sure there will be exceptions. Astrobot's an exception, right? Because it was an excellent game, and I'm sure the quality of that game saved them to a degree. And MLB is an exception to these rules. There will be them. It's just, and I'm not saying they're going to, but I do think, in terms of the ecosystem, these games will live on. They might live on different platforms. It's just, but and it also separates them a little bit from Xbox, who mostly are indie games at the minute, by the sounds of it.
And I think it's a very valid point that Jason Schreier makes in this piece, that by focusing so much on these big games, aren't they potentially missing out on a lot of, breakout hits that kind of come from the small games? I mean, it does feel to me like, say, for example, Dreams. I mean, I can't say I'm a big Dreams player, but it doesn't feel like that's being hugely supported. Like, I mean, that looks like something that could have been a right hit if it was a multi-platform game. That game, if Xbox released that game, it's on everything, right? I mean, certainly it's on PC. It would find a Well, Project Spark is incredibly primitive compared to what they're doing, but I mean, they've already got a core community, right? Like, there are people who love Media Molecule games. I don't know. I don't know if that's fair what I'm saying there, because I can't say that I follow that game hugely, but that does feel like a good example of something that potentially could be bigger than it is. You think about like a Roblox and a Minecraft and all these kind of breakout games. I don't know. Again, I know none of this makes any business sense, right? Everything you're saying is absolutely correct. Just from a selfish point of view, like, I mean, they're an entertainment company, right?
It's not selfish. You're a consumer. It's not selfish, is it, to think that way? And you're thinking it. I guarantee an awful lot of other gamers are thinking it. So, like, sometimes they do have to think about the consumers just as much as their bank balance.
This counts for Microsoft. This counts for Microsoft as well, right? Like, there's plenty of studios inside Microsoft who I wish they'd, make some smaller games. Ubisoft famously tried it for a while and they canned it off very quickly. Where they kind of, I can't even remember what it was called. That was a more recent, but they actually had an initiative where they had, I can't remember what it was called, but it was Valiant Hearts and it was Child of Light and Far Cry Blood Dragon, and everyone loved them.
Yeah, it's almost like the question is it the role of Xbox and PlayStation to make those games, or is it the role of the next generation? And they get bought up. You talked about Minecraft; it was bought by Microsoft. Fall Guys, Epic. Rocket League, Epic. When these games do break through, they find homes at the AAA studios who then take it to the next level. But it's hard for big companies to take major risks in that way. And it makes sense.
Sony PlayStation's strength at the moment is its content, right? Like, I mean, if they're going to go toe to toe with Xbox on who's offering the best ecosystem for games exist, I don't think they're winning that one.
That's a big claim.
I mean, I play some of the games you listed there.
I and everyone else buys. Well, okay. Obviously, PS4 was a completely dominant platform, and it's a different prospect. But you go and play a PS5 for PlayStation games right now because they've got the best exclusives. If you're looking at them toe to toe, if I didn't care about Spider-Man, Ratchet and Clank, etc., I think I'd buy an Xbox.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, I've been a long-time PlayStation fanboy, and I'm looking at an Xbox right now. I'm tempted by it. They are turning my head. I
honestly think that they're starting to have a bit of an optics problem, PlayStation. I mean, I see it increasingly, even from their own kind of fan base on our readership and stuff, that they just need a bit of good news, I think.
Especially when you consider this MLB stuff we mentioned earlier as well.
Yeah,
once again, it all feeds into the same big picture, doesn't it? And I'm with you on that personally.
I mean, maybe those games don't sell. Maybe they don't fit their business plan, but people love them. It's why people love PlayStation. When people talk about, playing Astro's Playroom now, feels like awful kind of pathos. It's like a melancholy game now, going and playing it because from the last
all those little guys have been killed.
Before, it was a celebration of like PlayStation, whereas if you play it now, it's like, look at all the stuff that we used to do.
They've just announced they're reinvesting in VR though. So I think their focus is just. I just think they switch things around a little bit. Right? So they'll be making VR games, investing in VR games. They're not spending masses of money on those. So those sort of projects will. I'm not too sure if we. I'm not too sure. I mean, it's interesting with Xbox and PlayStation is that in the news, you're right. It seems the media in particular seems to, and amongst some of the conversation seems to be that PlayStation has is sort of losing ground a little bit. But actually, in terms of sales, PlayStation is still exactly as far ahead.
Nobody's suggesting that.
No. I mean,
at all.
I mean, in terms of this what we like to call mood, it isn't really reflected in the consumer base. And also, if you look at the games. Like I've got an Xbox Series X. I love it, and I love it. PlayStation 5, and I love it. I play on my PlayStation 5 because I've got a load of exclusive games I don't have on my Xbox. And when you look at Xbox supports some amazing studios. Those games are coming. I had a few conversations with a few friends in Xbox studios. Those games they announced, Everwild, Perfect Dark, Fable, are so far away. Right, as in there might even be a new Xbox by the time those games come out, and like a mid-tier upgrade rather than the tiny model. They are so far away. And when you look at, and no wonder I know we mentioned Hideo Kojima and stuff. I wonder Xbox is looking and investing and signing certain products at the minute because they don't have a lineup of big exclusives at all. And
let's get on to that. Let's get on to that. That was going to be the fourth story, but it's a perfect segue, so thank you so much, Chris. Xbox is reportedly in talks to publish Hideo Kojima's next game, and this is according to VentureBeat, which claims Xbox hopes to make the second game from Death Stranding, Studio Kojima Productions, the focus of a plan to leverage Japanese talent. The article goes on to say, while the site's source was unable to confirm if Microsoft is yet to actually sign a deal for the new Kojima game, it claims a Kojima Productions figurine spotted on Xbox's Phil Spencer's shelf during a presentation in February was hinting at a potential partnership. He's done it before, of course. Prior to the launch of Microsoft's latest console in November 2020, Spencer also hid an Xbox Series S in plain sight on his bookshelf during interviews. So basically, he does have form for this. VentureBeat's report was published in response to Wednesday's announcement of a new PS5 game called Abandoned, which many felt could have been a secret Kojima game. But to be honest with me, that was never obviously going to be a Kojima game, given the fact that there wasn't 8 minutes of cutscenes and all that kind of stuff. But either way, this is interesting because everything we just talked about there about not having these big exclusives and all this kind of stuff. There's not many bigger pulls in the games than Hideo Kojima, is there? I mean, obviously, Death Stranding was relatively divisive in terms of critical acclaim, and it didn't maybe. I don't know how well it did in the world of PlayStation if they're happy with it, but it was definitely an interesting game. It was definitely an incredibly talked about game. Is this like a power play potentially from Xbox? Could it be the kind of thing that starts to turn the tide slowly with all these upcoming games that Chris has just mentioned as well back towards Xbox? Could it be a change in scenery?
Well, I guess the appeal for Xbox is that, well, one, that his games probably are a pretty good fit for Game Pass, especially if it's going to be a smaller game, which I imagine it might be, because they've kind of there's been this chatter for a little while that he's wanted to do a kind of horror thing, which we reported. They were talking to Stadia about it. Stadia kind of turned that down. So maybe it's that, because there was definitely an episodic horror thing, going back more than a year ago, which was the Stadia pitch. So maybe it's that. I mean, Xbox are all about, the opposite of the Sony chat we've just had. They're all about the goodwill right now, right? Certainly, I don't think it makes a lot of business sense from Sony's perspective. I mean, I don't know anything specifically about this project or this story, other than the bits and bobs that I've heard from the past. But I would be very surprised if Sony publishes another Kojima Productions game. I mean, Death Stranding seems that it sold, okay, and critically it was a little bit mixed, but it kind of did its job at the time of bringing a lot of attention to PlayStation. But Hideo Kojima is not a cheap date, right? I mean, the structure of PlayStation has changed since that game was signed. I gather that it cost a lot of money to get that game done. I think by the end, the relationship had soured a little bit from the start, because I don't think it was the same people at PlayStation by the time the game shipped as it was when it was signed, as I mentioned there. I think that kind of that game was sort of like, they were told to kind of get it out. If that was a Konami situation, I think Death Stranding would be coming out now. I think they still would have been working on it. So just from a pure business point of view, it kind of makes sense to me that they would be going and shopping around elsewhere. Yeah. I mean, I went to Kojima Productions, by the way, years ago when they were working on MGS5. And I love that Hideo Kojima exists, right? And I do. I think games need more more faces, right? I think he's good for games, and I'm a big fan of the fact that he exists and his works exist, and I hope he continues to make these crazy kind of art house blockbusters, forever. But I mean, having gone over there at the end of his Konami relationship, you just see how much money they must have been spending on him. Like Kojima Productions at the time was several floors of a skyscraper. They had a room just to store their foam guns in, their Nerf guns. Fully like every single expense you can imagine for like video capture and stuff like that. And that's for, one game every 5 years that sells about 5 mil, but from seeing the kind of the infrastructure they had, you'd think they'd be making Fortnite, right? So yeah, this doesn't surprise me at all, this story.
Hear me out. I'm dreaming here. Phil Spencer picks up the phone to Konami. He gets somewhere. He chats away to them. He's like, "Oh, come on, you've got a couple of IPs out there doing nothing. Silent Hill, Metal Gear Solid." Gets on the phone to Hideo Kojima. Could he do something? Could he be the one to resurrect these? I mean, this is genuinely dream territory.
They're shopping it around. Konami are definitely shopping it around. I mean, I reported recently that there is a Silent Hill game in the works at a Japanese studio. It's not Kojima Productions, as far as I know. However, I don't know. As I said, I don't know what Kojima Productions are working on, but I wouldn't 100% rule out anything like that, because it sounds like at one point Konami were definitely pitching multiple Silent Hill games. They wanted to, try and get it going again. There was, I think that the pitch was sort of like a more traditional game, and then more of like a new take, like a Telltale's kind of like episodic type thing. So Until Dawn, from what I understand, several people have told me that Until Dawn started at one point as a Silent Hill pitch. It didn't happen, so then they did not Until Dawn. Sorry, whatever came after that. What did they do afterwards? The Dark Pictures anthology.
Was it Man of Medan or something like that?
Yeah. So the Dark Pictures anthology, the games they did next, that started as exactly this thing, like episodic Silent Hill thing. Multiple people have told me that, enough that I'm pretty confident that that's probably true. There's a Castlevania game out there as well, I heard. I don't know anything about that, but Konami is definitely in the mood.
That's good though. That's good news, man.
I think so. They're at E3, right? They announced this week, and not to segue to that story too soon, but they're at E3.
Yeah.
So the gist that I get with Konami is that it's the same old story with big Japanese company. They've always been very, very hesitant to let anyone else touch their IP. And I think there's been a bit of a wake-up call over the last couple of years with obviously Metal Gear Survive. And did they do... What else did they do? Oh, Contra, which was like, I understand, wasn't very good. So I think the mood has softened, and they are kind of, as I stated in my earlier story, they're kind of ready to talk shop with developers. So I would expect, if I was a fan, I'd expect to be seeing Castlevania and Silent Hill, sooner or later.
That's big news. That's good news. A busy Konami, in my opinion, is better for the games industry always. But let's move over onto the final story today, and it's E3 related. Over on Video Games Chronicle, our very own Andy Robertson wrote, the Entertainment Software Association has confirmed new details on the all-digital E3 2021, including a partial partner list. Nintendo, Xbox, Capcom, Konami, Ubisoft, Take-Two Interactive, Warner Bros. Games, and Koch Media will participate in the event, which will run from June the 12th through to 15th, with media days running during the 4 days prior, as previously revealed by VGC. E3 2021 will see participating developers showcase their latest news and games directly to fans around the world, the ESA said on Tuesday. For more than 2 decades, E3 has been the premier venue to showcase the best that the video game industry has to offer while uniting the world through games, said Stanley Pierre-Louis, president and CEO of the ESA. He went on to say, we are evolving this year's E3 into a more inclusive event, but we'll still look to excite the fans with major reveals and insider opportunities that make this event the indispensable centre stage for video games. And the ESA said it intends to hold 2023's E3 as an in-person event, which will be lovely. Fingers crossed the world's ready for them. One big name missing, Chris, Sony. No Sony there. Nintendo and Xbox, though, there. Obviously, Konami, which we discussed, and Ubisoft. So some big publishers there, but still no Sony. What do you make of this story? Do you think the presents will be full from Nintendo and Xbox, or are we going to see a very watered-down version of their presence than the usual?
Well, I mean, I've got a thing with E3. It's really complicated, right? Because I'm a journalist, and journalists were stung way through a couple of years ago after their data leak. Even though the team that run E3 now are completely different to the people that ran it then. So that's a thing that means I'm always a little. You get it from a lot of journalists that don't like them. And then there's the other thing, which is I work for Reed Pop that runs PAX, which is a competitor to E3, and also as a business journalist.
So what you're saying is he hates E3.
No. I'm going to do a twist at the end. And the third thing is that I'm an industry journalist, and when I go to E3, I get all the big exec interviews, but it's often 10 minutes or 15 minutes. Last year, because it was spread out across the whole summer, I got a lot of time with industry people that I would not normally got, and the games had more room to breathe. E3 is expensive. You can get almost as much attention with a live stream. Blah 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 blah. E3 doesn't make sense for anybody. I love it, and I want it to be successful. And I love it because I'm as a gamer. Last year was tedious. Last year's drawn out multi.
You were correct. It was horrible.
Just really really boring. And the thing is, digital E3 doesn't make sense. E3 has no digital presence, right? And the VGC has more digital presence than E3, right?
It's a big claim.
But it's true. It's the same. We've got it at our company, right? It's sort of we're talking about PAX Digital and EGX Digital, the company I work for. But Eurogamer and GI have far more digital presence than those two shows. So why are they? We're not. These things in the digital space. E3 doesn't offer much. Right, you might as well go to IGN, might as well go to VGC, you might as well go to whatever. You might as well go to any of the games media over E3. It doesn't offer very much. But I think this is about support. This is about keeping the brand alive, keeping it relevant. And the problem you've got with E3, and Andy experienced this with the is that the board don't agree. E3 is run by a trade body, so these are just companies that have come together for the greater good of the industry, and it might be around government policies, it might be around age ratings. They can't agree on what they want from E3. The E3 that will be announced will be a compromise. And the thing is, every single time, E3 try to compromise, or we'll let some more consumers in so that will please EA still don't come back. PlayStation want one thing, EA wants something, Nintendo wants something else, Xbox wants something else. And ESA has to come up with some form of compromise that pleases all of them. And it doesn't seem to exist at the minute. And And but they all, every time I do talk to, I have a lot of conversation with PlayStation, because I go to E3, I have conversations with PlayStation, I have conversations with EA about E3 and their view on it, and their response is, it just needs to sort itself out and we will come back. And but the thing is, the problem they've got is everyone sort of disagrees. So that's the problem E3 has. But in terms of this year's show, I expect Nintendo will do. Nintendo's always backed it. E3 ESA was formed by Nintendo. It was formed by PlayStation as well, but it's formed by Nintendo. It was formed by Sega. It was formed by EA, and it's always had the support. I don't know if Xbox. I don't know how much they have to talk about. I know they've got an event on in March or something. Not March. Gone through that. So they've got an event on soon. But Nintendo, they love their June slot. Announce a load of games. They couldn't do it last year. And
I mean, all of these companies will be would have been working towards some sort of June tentpole anyway, right?
Yeah.
I think the thing I agree that last year was, was just it was rubbish. It was confusing. It was all over the place. It was underwhelming. And, as I said on the last podcast, you can probably partially blame that on the pandemic, right? Because obviously everyone was working remotely, going to throw this stuff together. So maybe just on the basis that there's more preparation this year, that it'll be better. It's already a little bit more exciting for me that it's seeming to be centralizing a little bit. I mean, it's not just the E3 stuff. Summer Game Fest, Jeff Keighley's thing, he's kind of come out and said that that's now going to be a month thing, like a finite thing, rather than this big spread out kind of vague banner. There's Steam are doing their thing in June. I'm sure there was some other stuff that I saw. So it's good that it's centralizing from my point of view. However, on that point, yeah, I kind of just feel that, I mean, I echo, I think this is what Chris was trying to say. I want to see E3 come back. I miss a physical E3. I think there's nothing that we're all missing at the moment than some physical bloody contact, right? Yeah. There's a lot of journalists out there. I see that, collectively, we all used to be really cynical about E3, and now the same people are all like, bring it back. But I do feel that E3 is sort of like Microsoft and Nintendo probably were planning something anyway for June. Yeah. And, they're obviously, they are members of the ESA, as, Chris mentioned. So it's kind of in their interest to help support them. And I think they've just sort of like come to some sort of arrangement on that sense. All of the stuff that I wrote about, it comes back to what Chris was saying about how, lots of people got lots of different ideas about what E3 should be internally at the ESA and the members. At one point they were muting, on-demand game demos. At one point they were muting like a paywall version of that, which is all absolutely true. But, obviously I reported that from information from, weeks ago, and they've kind of seemingly U-turned on that by the time I reported it. I spoke to the ESA this week, and they confirmed to me that the game demos aren't happening this year either, which kind of explains why the paywall thing kind of went away, because I imagine that is where they were going to attribute much of the value of some sort of premium access, right? That we kind of discussed on last week's show.
The problem with those game demos is scale. By the way, we tried to do it with PAX. It's the tech they were going to use before. The tech that you talked about in your story was different to what I understood, and we knew that tech that can't hit
parsec.
That's the
thing. Because I've heard they were talking to parsec, but obviously in my report it kind of mentioned GeForce Now, which was the main one that they wanted to partner with. But obviously it looks like, I've spoken to so many people since that report's gone out who've been involved in this sort of stuff. And they all say the same thing, this event tried to do demos and this one tried to do demos. And it makes sense on paper, but actually trying to do it, not to mention the fact that putting a demo together is a nightmare for a developer in the first place. Not to mention, you're not going to stream an Xbox demo, are you? You're not going to stream a Nintendo demo. So
you probably do an Xbox one, but Nintendo and PlayStation, certainly not. How are you going to get those dual sense experience into the homes of people that don't have one? Is the
One thing I will say is like, because I've got a unique position compared to you. I'm just a consumer. I am not a games journalist. I have not been to E3, and I certainly don't have interviews with big, massive game execs. But one thing I will say is just literally a guy who talks nonsense on YouTube videos. Is I miss E3 as an individual, because to me E3 is video game Christmas. It's the kind of thing I look forward to every single year. And last year, to me, it not being there, it did make life a little bit more miserable. And like, I didn't think I realised how much I missed it until it wasn't there. And honestly, I loved the condensed nature of it. And last year, it felt like during the Summer Games, which was just great to see some kind of alternative. But you were kind of waiting for things to happen, never knowing when they were going to happen. It was all a bit sketchy. And as a result, it felt diluted. And one thing I do love about E3 is you get your Keanu Reeves moments, you're breathtaking. You get your big headline gets. You get Ubisoft messing around with Miyamoto and all that kind of stuff. You get these little memes and that kind of stuff. I don't know. I enjoy it. It's fun. It's more. Yeah, it's a celebration of video games. And to be honest, E3 gets headlines as well. And I do think a strong E3 is strong for video games as well,
100%.
because it is. Yeah, it'll make BBC News and all that kind of stuff. Where I'm sure a Sony presentation will do, but Nintendo Direct is not going to cause news. It's not going to get the headlines outside the games industry in the way that E3 can. So I like it, man. I like it as a video game fan.
But this going on what you're saying, actually, this is quite interesting from a consumer's perspective, is that when we say E3, right, and you say it to consumers, I say it to you, you're probably thinking the Microsoft press conference. You're probably thinking the Nintendo Direct. You're probably thinking, you're probably even thinking the EA Play stuff. Thing is, they're not E3. They're not in E3. They're not on the side of E3. It's not in a hall at the back of E3. They're elsewhere in LA. They're separate events. Yeah. All that E3 is are two big halls and a little one in between in the Los Angeles Convention Center, where you can walk around and play games. I've gone to E3 every year. I spend so little time in those halls.
But that's the physical thing, right? But those events are under the E3 umbrella.
I would say 99% for 99.9% of people in the games industry, or as a consumer like me, the E3 isn't that. I mean, I understand that it is, but it literally, for us, so it's interesting to see the perception, because obviously what I see as E3 is totally different to what you see. And I'm aware it's there, but it's interesting, isn't it?
So when we say E3 is under threat, I don't think we actually mean, or at least I hope we don't mean, that the week is under threat. Right, and that the Nintendo Direct's under threat, and the PlayStation State of Play happened last year during the E3 week, and PlayStation's the only one who said they weren't going, and nobody's saying those things aren't happening. I think the challenge is not the challenge for E3 is the show, and it's the ESA and trying to justify selling those booths and stuff. And I think the fear that I've got is that if you take away the show floor, take away E3, you take away every EA's over there in a different part of LA, and PlayStation's over there. When there's nothing to anchor these things together, do they all just drift apart off? Which is what happened last year. There was nothing to anchor the events together, and they all just went away. And even though E3 may be weak and may not be necessary, and halls are half empty, and all this yada yada yada, is that bit needed to keep Xbox doing their press conference on the Monday and Bethesda on the Sunday and that kind of stuff?
For the people that I spoke to, I mean, it seemed to be, it's easier to justify the cost when it's a physical event. I mean, I think to a lot of game developers, the key point is all of the world's press are there. The eyes of consumers are all on that event. So you get your kind of return of investment that way. Whereas on a digital show, obviously, that just evaporates.
And also, that's what I said earlier, though. What does E3 offer as a digital show? E3 is a physical event. At least it's physical. They're building an event for you. If you're sitting there, E3 is a digital show. Well, E3 doesn't have an audience. It doesn't have a database of 1 million consumers or anything like that. It has media relationships, but then any PR agency does. PlayStation has a bigger audience than E3. Xbox has a bigger audience than E3. Nintendo has a bigger audience than E3. They could all do their own thing and still bring in loads and loads of people. I'm glad they're not. Well, I'm glad they are doing that, but doing it next.
I mean, it's you can see this coming full circle, don't you? Because E3 exists because all of the biggest publishers have banded together and identified that they're stronger by, creating this games Christmas, as Steve said. And, if it all falls apart, probably at some point, they're all going to get back together and go, should we just kind of like put these under some umbrella?
Well, it started, E3's origin started because E3 used to be an event, used to be at CES. It wasn't called E3, it was at CES. Games used to be in CES. And games used to get stuck outside in the tent. And one year in Las Vegas, it rained and it ruined all of Sega's consoles. And Sega threw their toys out the pram. We're not going to CES anymore. And they launched their own event. And then a year or two later, ESA was formed on the back of the age rating system. because of the Mortal Kombat controversy and stuff like that. And then Nintendo said, you know what? I don't want to go to CES anymore. Let's do our own thing. And that's where it's come from. That's where its origins were. It was the games industry saying, we don't want to stick our stuff under and be treated as second-class citizens at a technology event. We want to be, want to have our own show. We feel we should have our own show. And I think the games industry should have its own show. And hopefully it will continue to do so. It just needs to find its compromise. It needs to find its identity. It used to be a retail show. Retailers used to go there, see a load of games, sign them. Don't need it anymore. Then it became a media show, but now it's all about streaming and all this kind of stuff. And the media has become less relevant. And it's all about going direct to consumers. So they're still retail and they're still media, but the role of E3, the justifications of it is weaker than it's ever been. And I think now it's about finding what the new justification is.
No, you're spot on, absolutely spot on. It'll be interesting to see next year. Hopefully it's in person, because obviously that's great news for everyone in any form of life. It's brilliant news. So I think it'll be interesting to see, let's see how it looks, I guess. And I'm hoping Sony change their mind and get involved, because I do genuinely believe the game is stronger when everyone's involved in E3. But that's gone.
I will say this: last time I interviewed Jim Ryan, he kept referring to announcing stuff at E3. Like even in the head of the PlayStation people, it's just he's saying E3 is shorthand as big announcement event, and that is still that. So I think they'll be back if ESA and the board can find a compromise that suits them.
And they should do, in my opinion. Anyway, that is the end of today's stories. And of course, we go over to now AskVGC, where you can get your questions as well using the hashtag AskVG, and we answer them every single Friday. So make sure to send them around Wednesday, Thursday, and we can get discussing your questions via Twitter. I'm going to start with this one from Asim Tanvir, at Asim Tanvir on Twitter. And he's kind of roughly linked, it's kind of roughly around E3, I would argue. It's not, but Nintendo are going to be there, so maybe. He says, do you guys think the enhanced Switch model will come out this year? I mean, I've added the E3 angle there, but I do feel like there's a link there potentially. What do you reckon? Are we going to see it this year? Could we see it at E3 if it's a thing? Or is it going to be another casualty to the big delay?
Well, it seems to be a thing, doesn't it? I don't think there's any disputing at this point that, the evidence has mounted that they are working on some sort of hardware. You can't rule out anything slipping, under the current climate. It does actually seem a little bit, far-fetched that they're going to release this new hardware, when, famously, hardly anyone in the electronics business can, manufacture enough of their devices currently. Add to that the fact that, obviously the Switch is, selling gangbusters, but as Chris will tell you, it's not about kind of reaching new consumers with any new device from them. It's about kind of keeping the current one spending.
It's 4 years now, isn't it? So it's been a while now, I would say. 4 years since the Switch.
Into its fifth year, the console.
It's
getting old. And Andy said it. My bit.
It feels old to me, by the way. I'm just going to put it out there. As someone playing it now, maybe it's because I've been absolutely. I've been drinking the 4K 60 FPS next generation live, so maybe it's that. But when I went back on it a couple of days ago, and I was noticing the low resolution. I was noticing the scratches on my Switch, and I was thinking I could do with a new one personally. It looks a bit clunky now. My Joy-Cons are drifting. I'm ready personally as a Nintendo consumer. I'm ready personally. So
I think the answer: do I think the Switch will be new Switch of this year? A lot of people are using Switch's gangbuster sales as a reason why that it won't. But the truth is, a new Switch, just like the PlayStation 4 Pro and the Xbox One X and all that kind of stuff, those devices are designed to keep the current audience of people engaged and playing. If you're a Switch player like I am, and I play Switch all the time, and I'm sitting there going, I love this device, it's my favorite machine, it's a bit old, I'd love a new one. I'm that audience. Give me a new Switch this Christmas with a couple of interesting Nintendo first-party games, and I'm going to be very happy. And it will stop me perhaps going to PlayStation, spending too much time on PlayStation 5 or Netflix and stuff like that. Now, I don't know what Nintendo's data is. The question is, all the people that bought Switches in 2017, which was about 20 odd million people, are they still playing on their Switch now? And if the answer is, they're starting to drift away, then now's the time to launch a new device. It's not about how many people are buying this device now. It's about what the audience is doing, what's the engagement levels like. That's the business decision. Nintendo's not always known for business decisions. They do things impulsively. They might, there was you talk about, it seems almost certain there's going to be a Switch Pro. I remember when the Wii HD was almost certainly, definitely 100% coming out, and it never arrived. Right, so it was. I've seen this before, but I think it would be. I think probably this year. It's been a while. I think we all feel.
Was there anything concrete behind Wii HD ever though?
Oh, well, the thing is,
like speculation to me.
Yeah, but it might well be. The thing is, Nintendo are always working on new devices. They're always checking with their chips manufacturer about whether or not what they can manufacture and what's possible and that kind of stuff. The fact that these rumors keep coming back around is because Bloomberg knows somebody, or whoever knows somebody at these companies that know what Nintendo are asking of them. But that doesn't mean Nintendo doesn't go. Yeah.
But there's also stuff cropping up in the firmware updates as well. Kind of referencing to 4K resolution and also.
I was only pouring a tiny bit of cold water. I actually do think it's happening. I think, but I don't. The thing is, the thing for me is, I bet that the Switch Pro is more of a side spin-off, like a new 3DS or a DSi, than a whole singing, dancing 0.5 model, like mid-level model. I wonder if the difference you'll look better and nicer and run a bit smoother. But I do wonder if ultimately what we're going to get is a slightly souped-up version of what we've already got, rather than a pro-style super model. But,
I hope you're wrong. I want at least the dock anyway. I want 4K. I want to see Breath of the Wild 2 in 4K. I want that.
4K is just the output stuff, right? So it's like what I'm saying. What I mean by that is, the device will ultimately be the same. It's just that they've done those little tweaks to it.
Okay. Sorry. Aesthetically and all that kind of stuff, and look the same.
Nintendo's got to play a game here because they sell their consoles based on their first-party games. We've seen situations before where Nintendo released too many of their big first-party games at the end of a generation, which means they have nothing to start the next generation. Now that didn't happen with the Switch. The Switch, they had their Zelda and Mario all ready to go from the first. Now, if a Switch Pro is
the Wii U games as well. So.
Yeah, well, they had that full back. So the question is, Breath of the Wild's this year, let's say. If Mario Odyssey 2's next year, what would they have for when they switch to? You need to be thinking about those things. What's Super Switch, whatever. Do they have an idea of, what are they going to hold stuff back for the launch of the next
Mario Kart?
I was going to say, history tells you as well that whenever they kind of bring in these iterations in light of what you're saying, that they're selling it to the existing audience, you tend to get very, very core games. I'm thinking like one of the 3DS's revisions, I think launched with Majora's Mask HD and a new Metroid game, Monster Hunter. Yeah. So I would imagine that kind of cool fans will be chuffed with whatever they kind of come up with to go alongside that. And obviously, if they're pushing 4K, then what's better than bloody Breath of the Wild 2, right?
Well, yeah, and we're also looking at a situation where we're on uncharted territory for Nintendo. Heading into 5 years of a console. Normally, it's game over. The Wii was done by this point. The next generation is we're all looking at that. GameCube didn't get this far. The Wii U didn't get this far. But not only has the Switch got this far, but it's selling better than it did in any previous year. We're in a bit of a weird world where second generation Nintendo titles, second generation Mario and Zelda titles are a thing, and not like the last death throes of the generation they're in.
On that question, hold that thought. Carl Stevens wrote in at @LWaster, says, AskVGC, Pac-Man being the third Battle Royale game on Nintendo Switch, do we think we can expect a Zelda one later this year for the Zelda anniversary? And if so, how do you think it would work? Zelda Battle Royale. I wasn't expecting Pac-Man a week ago, so that definitely wouldn't surprise me. Do you want to see it, Andy? And if so,
I was actually thinking about that recently. Like, that makes complete sense, right? Like, I would be amazed if they don't release a Zelda Battle Royale this year.
When are we getting it? When is this anniversary coming in?
You've already seen them playing around with like some custom kind of dungeon stuff in some of the recent releases. If the game just designs itself, right, I could make that game. Spawning more harder enemies into the dungeon rooms. Like that has to come out, right? Like I don't know anything
VGC
about that.
Productions here. Can't wait.
If that game doesn't come out, amazed.
Yeah, well, it's good. I suspect we'll hear about Zelda 35 soon. If E3 is happening, then I expect. The Mario 35 is now behind us, and that's the reason why we haven't heard about it.
Rest in peace, Mario. Always. No, I hope so. I think that'd be great fun. And as you said, Andy, it makes sense. Just I don't know. To me, it's an automatically generated dungeon thing. Using the little tile rooms and all that kind of stuff. It makes an awful lot of sense for me. And I do want the Zelda anniversary stuff. Make it Christmas for me, Nintendo. That's all I'm asking for you. It's not too much to ask, given everything we've been through for the past year. But anyway, that brings us to the end of VGC Off The Record. Thank you so much, of course, to Andy and Chris. Guys, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And don't forget, you can check out obviously this if you're watching the video version over on podcast providers, and if you're watching listen to the podcast provider, you can watch our faces over on VGC's YouTube channel. For now, though, have a wonderful weekend, and we'll catch you all very, very soon.